Between an upcoming snap election, the biggest political realignment in years, and a growing risk of financial disaster, Japan's politics are heating up. So let's get into it. So, Japanese politics has been in something of a state of limbo since the general election in late 2024. The Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, has dominated Japanese politics for most of the post-war era, but the party found itself in its weakest position in years after a damaging financial scandal and growing unpopularity under former Prime Minister Kishida Fumio. His successor, Ishiba Shigeru, took the reins just before the 2024 election, but led the party to a major defeat, costing the LDP nearly a quarter of its seats and losing the governing coalition's majority in parliament. Over the next year, Ishiba managed to maintain minority rule, largely due to the fact that the opposition was scattered and divided. But after further electoral setbacks last summer, Ishiba too bowed out, setting up a contentious party leadership race that eventually gave way to Japan's new prime minister, Takaichi Sanae. Takaichi's leadership of the LDP and election as prime minister back in October sent shockwaves through Tokyo. She's Japan's first female leader, whose election was seen as a major historical glass ceiling breaking moment. She also, however, is somewhat of a controversial figure, seen as deeply socially conservative and hawkish on foreign policy, representing a shift away from more moderate leaders like Ishiba and Kishida, back to the hardline politics of arch-conservative Abe Shinzo. Her accession caused the breakdown of the LDP's relationship with its junior coalition partner, Komeito, a kind of peace-focused religious party, and for a time jeopardized the Liberal Democratic Party's hold on the prime ministership. Despite this, Takaichi has proven herself to be a popular and skilled politician. After the breakup of the governing coalition, she forged a new agreement with a different party, Nippon Ishin no Kai, and pulled independent MPs into her camp, securing a majority in parliament for the first time in over a year. She also completely reversed the opinion polls of her predecessors, and has maintained roughly 60 to 70% approval, largely on account of perceptions of her leadership and optimism over her chances of effecting change. She's also come into office with big plans for the economy, and presided over a fairly significant stock market rally that began late last year. All of this has led Takaichi to take a bold step barely 3 months into her administration, seeking to seize on her personal popularity and reverse her party's decline. The Prime Minister dissolved Parliament on January 23rd and set a snap election for February 8th. So, while Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae and the Liberal Democratic Party seem to have a lot going for them headed into the February 8th election, there are still significant risks. Despite Takaichi's personal popularity, her party remains quite unpopular, with only around 30% support, which is an even lower mark than it had at the time of the last election, and significantly trails the Prime Minister's 60 to 70. Polls have also found that half of voters disapprove of holding an election now, little more than a year after the last one. And despite the strength of the stock market, many of Japan's economic indicators are going the other way. Rising cost of living remains a serious issue. The yen continues to struggle, and economic experts have expressed alarm over the fiscal responsibility of some of Takaichi's economic proposals. Favoring both tax cuts and stimulus, concerns are growing that Japan, already one of the most indebted countries in the world, could be headed further toward disaster. Concerns that have fueled volatility in the country's bond market. But perhaps the greatest threat to the LDP's chances comes from the opposition. Earlier in January, as rumors were circulating about the coming election, and the Prime Minister was preparing an official announcement, the LDP's former partner Komeito made a shocking announcement. They would be joining the Constitutional Democratic Party, led by former Prime Minister Noda Yoshihiko, to form an entirely new party, the Centrist Reform Alliance, or CRA. As its name implies, the party is tacking to the center, attempting to build the biggest tent to counter the LDP's rightward shift. By the party's own words, it's embracing moderation, but also consensus building, and rejects extremism and traditional political ideologies. While I don't want to oversell the capabilities of the CRA, especially considering how new and unproven it is, the party's formation was a rare show of unity for the opposition, and perhaps the most significant political realignment since the electoral collapse and fracturing of the center-left juggernaut, the Democratic Party of Japan, beginning in 2012. And regardless, with the CRA's formation, Takaichi has a much more significant challenger than she did just a few weeks ago. Analysis has found that if voters from the two parties that form the CRA had been united in 2024, the results would have been very different, with the LDP losing in 35 districts and the CRA winning the election by a fairly large margin. But those results are far from certain this time around, and Takaichi's popularity is undeniable. By almost every indication, this is still her race to lose. Her strategy thus far has been to make the race personal, framing it less as a battle between parties, as elections are typically viewed, and more as a referendum on leadership. She called out the CRA's co-leaders personally, former Prime Minister Noda and former Komeito head and LDP ally Saito Tetsuo, saying that if her party wins, I will be Prime Minister. Otherwise, it will be Prime Minister Noda or Prime Minister Saito. So, while Takaichi attempts to leverage her popularity into greater power in parliament, and the opposition pulls out all of the stops to attempt an upset, it's impossible to say exactly what the result will be. But one thing is certain, Japan's politics are heating up.
Yeah.